We hope you enjoyed this teaching from Christ Church Birmingham. More teaching can be found at www.christchurchbirmingham.org.
So this morning, as Steve said, we're going to continue in our short preaching series looking at the values of Regions Beyond. And this morning, I'm going to be talking about raising and releasing sons and daughters. So I've got 4 points that I'd like to look at with you. But first, let's pray. So God, I thank you that you are here. I thank you that you have spoken to us during worship. God, I thank you that we are your sons and daughters and that we get to partner with you to raise one another up and to release one another and others into your kingdom for your glory. Amen. So as a church family, we have a mission to raise sons and daughters in this country and elsewhere. It's going to be a mission that is going to continue way past probably our lifetimes. It's going to be in generations to come until Jesus comes back to earth. So we're talking about raising sons and daughters, but what does it mean to be a son or daughter? Now, the Bible is full of amazing stories about it. And it has stories about being God's children, and it's a theme that runs so deep throughout. In the Bible, the concept of being God's son or daughter is there to remind us of the incredible family that we get to belong to as believers. So if you believe in Jesus this morning, you are God's son and daughter. Romans 8:14-17 speaks of how the Holy Spirit testifies that we are all children, that we are adopted into God's family. It says, "For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. The Spirit you received does not make you slaves, so that you live in fear again. Rather, the Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Father." The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Now, if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may share in his glory. So we have been adopted into the family of God, chosen by God and loved before the foundations of the world. Ephesians 1 verse 5 says that God chose us for adoption to himself as sons through Jesus Christ according to the purpose of his will. God's love for his children is like none other. 1 John Chapter 3, verse 1 says that, "See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God." And God's love is unconditional, it is unchanging, and it is everlasting. It's a love that sustains and guides us through all of life's challenges. And as God's sons and daughters, our identity is rooted in Jesus. Galatians 3 verse 26 reminds us, it says, "In Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith." If you believe in Jesus, you are part of God's family. And we together are his sons and daughters. Jesus raises us up and releases us as sons and daughters, as well as our church family too. So when we grasp our full identity in Jesus, we find purpose and meaning and that incredible sense of belonging. So how do we raise and release one another up? So my first point is by teaching God's word. Proverbs 22 verse 6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." So we must train ourselves and each other, and particularly new or young Christians. It was going to go, wasn't it? So we must train one another up, particularly new or young Christians, with the teachings and truth of Jesus. Now, the church family plays a vital role in this, as it provides that support and that supportive environment for spiritual growth. You have started Alpha this week. What an amazing opportunity to teach the foundations of God's word to new people. This is incredible. You are able to start raising new people of faith into God's family. Those of you who are serving on Alpha are able to share the foundational truths of Jesus that the Bible is full of, equipping those who are on Alpha to navigate life's challenges and curveballs so that they can navigate them with wisdom and discernment. And Alpha provides a really safe space to do that. And the same goes for our impact groups that usually run, and our children's work and our creche. Setting time aside for your own and also with your church family, times of reading and discussing the Bible together are so important. This grows yours and mine and the church's relationship with one another, and more importantly, with God. So there's recently been a change in our children's work provision. So we saw that there was a real need for creche, so a provision for our under fours. And what a wonderful thing that we are now able to equip that young generation to hear about Jesus in a wonderful, loving environment. And we still get to support our children in primary school and our youth. Like, don't forget about them. They might not be going out every Sunday, but it's so important that they get to hear and see God's word in action. Inviting your friends to church is also a really great way for them and you to hear God's word, to raise one another up and to release each other, to raise sons and daughters of God. They get to hear of this wonderful love. It's amazing. You get to raise and release sons and daughters of God. How he adopts you and them, your friends, into a family that they can belong. So teaching God's word is foundational for raising and releasing sons and daughters. My second point is to be imitators of Jesus. And this is based on 1 Corinthians chapter 11, where Paul writes, "Be imitators of me as I am of Christ." Now, as Christians, we should want to live our lives like Jesus. When we see and we read in the Bible those truths about Jesus, our hearts should go, I want to be like that. And then if we are imitating Jesus, we get to show how much he loves us to other people. But I don't know about you, and I kind of hope that maybe you're a little bit like me so that I don't feel alone in it. But when it's like the mundane parts of life or the really stressful parts, it can be quite overwhelming, and it can be really easy to forget how much God loves us and loves me. I know that when I am really stressed, I have to take that moment to think about just the sheer awe and understanding of what Jesus did for me. Jesus, the Son of God, laid down his life, took all of the things that keep me or would have kept me from being with God. He took all of that. He paid the price. He lost his life. He died for us so that we would be forgiven and then have eternal relationship with God. That's just incredible. When we actually grasp that and we think about how much somebody loves us, that they would die for us, it's just amazing. It's just so incredible that I am loved that much and that I am forgiven that much, and that I get to be his daughter. Now, I am not saying that we need to die to raise and release sons and daughters of God, but many people have done that. Many people have died, and many people still do. We are so privileged in this country. But I am saying that there are times, more often than we might like, where God asks us to put down our own desires and our own selfishness and our own needs to serve and love his sons and daughters. So I'm going to come back to that in a little while. Stick with me. Now, I have the incredible role of being a mom. I love it. It's such a privilege. And it's something that for many, many years, I didn't think would ever happen. And I became a parent through suffering, heartbreak, and challenge, and doubt. And being a parent has times of heartbreak, doubt, selfishness, and challenge, and all sorts of things. And I often see the parts of me that I would like to change, or that God is convicting me to change in my daughter. And those of you who are parents, and maybe even those of you who aren't, you get to see how, as parents, we behave with our children. Our children learn from seeing how we behave. They learn by seeing our attitude and our actions. It's tough. So it's not enough for me to simply tell Matilda how she should behave or respond to situations. I need to show her and demonstrate it to her. I need to imitate Jesus so that she learns to imitate him. I need to practice forgiveness, love, patience, and humility, even in moments of adversity. So this week, we've had quite a few challenges. We've been busier than we would have really liked to have been. My job has been really demanding over the last few weeks, and I found it hard to actually switch off from my job. There's been some amazing moments of great, joyful emotion in my family this week as we've celebrated a few birthdays. But some of my family have also had a tough visit to extended family members who are quite challenging to get along with. My husband and I are both committed to speak at different church events too, which require preparation and time. So my mind wasn't always on being fully present with my daughter. She's also been a little bit under the weather this week, craving rest time, which she had yesterday. But she also has wanted to enjoy the busyness of her school activities and after-school clubs and seeing her friends that she loves. And on Wednesday, after a trip to the dentist too, I told you it was a busy week, there was a meltdown and the very first, "I don't want to see you ever again" line. Like she's 5. Thought this would be like when she's a teenager. But it hurt and it made me really sad. But I had a choice in that moment to imitate Jesus, to show her what it was like when I do that to God. So even if she actually didn't want to see me again, she would know that I am that constant, ever-loving presence, just like Jesus. And I might not get it as right as Jesus does, and I really want to. But I need to demonstrate the qualities of Jesus to her. That love, forgiveness, patience, and humility. And humility is saying sorry to her for when I get it wrong. It's demonstrating that. It's forgiving for the hurt caused. It's loving and being patient. The moment I said, "I will always be here for you, and when you're ready, you can come to me," everything changed. We talked, we cried, we hugged, we cried a lot more, we talked a bit more. And in that moment, when that meltdown was happening, she didn't know how to respond well to what she was feeling. She didn't have the understanding or the level of communication to say it. So it was up to me to imitate Jesus and to model to her how to respond in times that are really hard. Now, I've shared this story because it's fresh, and as Dan and Brian and everybody who speaks from the front will say, that God does things in our lives the week that we speak to really highlight some stuff. But I've also experienced similar conversations with people that I've been trying to tell them about Jesus. They might have said yes to having Jesus in their life, or we might be at the start of that conversation. And we're doing it sensitively. But sometimes, as many of us will know, that when God convicts us of something, we want to push back. So sometimes people that we love and we want to see brought into the family will push back. They will be defensive. They might lash out because they don't know how to communicate. They don't know yet how to imitate Jesus. I wonder if at times you have done this too. I know I have when God has challenged me on something in my life. I have shared many times that church planting is hard. It's lonely where we are in East Birmingham. It's lonely without a support network near us. And sometimes I find it really hard to pray about the suffering and oppression that is happening and has happened. I would love to say no to God for being there. I'd love to go and live in the rural countryside where just you get annoyed by the sheep's baaing and the cows mooing and the cockerel and all of that. But that wouldn't be in obedience to what God is asking me to do. And because I want to imitate Jesus, I have that heart desire to be obedient to God. Just like Jesus was obedient to God when he died on the cross for us. And I have at times lashed out. I have screamed, I have shouted, I have pushed back at God in prayer. And I hope that by sharing these things, perhaps if you do it too, you don't feel quite as alone in it. But if you are all so spiritual with God, please teach me. I want to be more like you too. And that's the joy of being in church family. People that I have brought to Alpha courses in the past or have discipled have made that decision that they don't want to be in friendship with us anymore. And they have shouted and they have screamed as they have tried to process the difficult things. And sometimes, like my daughter, we don't know the best way to communicate what we're feeling. In these times, it can be really easy and acceptable in the world's view to become defensive, to let the hurt override. But as we raise and release sons and daughters, we have the opportunity to put down our own desires and to be obedient to God in what he is asking of us, and supporting and raising and releasing sons and daughters for us to imitate Jesus. So when we know our identities in God as sons and daughters, we are able to imitate Jesus, to raise and release sons and daughters to be like him. That's why it's important to be able to go back to God's word, to teach that, to hear it, to share about it, and for us to imitate Jesus. It shows people what Jesus is like so that they can be raised up. And discipleship is key for this, and that's my third point. Now, there is so much that we can do in our own lives with and for other people that we are raising and releasing. And it's so important that as sons and daughters, we are surrounded by a supportive church family. And this includes you too, to receive that support, but also participating in raising and releasing others. Now, I love reading, and I wish I had more time to read. And there are a few books that I have found really useful, which if you love reading too, I can tell you about it. But discipleship has played a really key part in my life, both being discipled and discipling others. Proverbs 27 verse 17 reminds us that as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Through these interactions of communicating and discipling one another, we can see that our faith will grow and we will develop meaningful relationships. So seek out godly mentors within the church who can provide spiritual guidance for you and support you. In Titus chapter 2, it talks about the importance of older women teaching and nurturing younger women in faith. Meet regularly, share and do life with one another. Iron sharpens iron. And sometimes you've got to be really intentional about it. Life is busy. Myself and one friend have booked in dates until the end of the year so that we have got time to share and do life with one another. And our lives can be changed as we get to imitate Jesus together, build and raise and release one another up into loving challenge and praying for one another. Miracles happen And vulnerability is so important, and relationship with one another is even more important. My friends and I often jokingly will say through our sharing, do you want the honest answer or input here? And that comes from a place where we believe that we've heard from God, and it's going to challenge and kind of steer the conversation in a particular way. But we all do that together. It's not one way. It's not me just going, hang on a minute. It's them doing that to me as well, but in a loving way where they want to see me and I want to see them imitate Jesus more. Sometimes it's really messy because, again, we can get defensive. Oh, you got the wrong end of the stick there. And my friend's like, no, I've just heard from Jesus. Hang on. But other times it can be so fruitful. Chains and things that tie us up break. The enemy flees. He has to do one. He has to go, and we have to have the courage to say that. And this very much overlaps with the point that I was making about imitating Jesus and laying down our own selfishness. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times when we need to receive more than we're able to raise and release others. But it is important that we hear God and that we're obedient to him. It's important for us to remember our identity as a son or daughter of God. Philippians 2, verses 3-4 advises us. It says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. When we demonstrate humility, we teach the sons and daughters of God the importance of selflessness and servanthood. Now, there have been times when I have been in church over the years where I am exhausted. You know, being a new mum a few years ago when you have sleep deprived. Like, I love Steph. She has done amazing coming this morning with 2 of the children and a baby on her. Man, it is tough. And you've got everybody coming and you've got everybody wanting something. And I can remember a few years ago, that was me. And I had some really sad news one morning and I just wanted to stay in bed. I wanted to kind of weather away a little bit, heal and deal internally with the sad news that I had. But I felt God say, no, I need you to go to church. I was like, I don't want to go, but okay. It's the little yeses, the big and the small yeses that we say that make an impact. And I had a morning, you know, God spoke to me that morning at church, but I was in that church service because my friend needed me. A friend that I was doing discipleship with needed to sound off about a situation that she was facing. And I felt like I didn't have capacity, but God did. And God used my brokenness and my weakness and me going, okay, God, I will lay down my own desire to be nurtured right now. And I am here and I'm going to show up for my friend. And my friend and I talked about it the next time that we met. Because again, vulnerability is so important. It's not about going, oh, my friend's really offended me and I'm just going to let that keep growing. It's about sharing it. And as we talked, we raised up and we released one another. We read the Bible, we prayed together, and God broke chains. He released us to live more in the freedom that he had for us. And over time, through that very moment and that situation, God allowed us to grow in our gifts. It's amazing. And my 4th and final point is to pray and trust. Praying for one another is a huge opportunity to raise and release sons and daughters. Whether or not it's for ourselves in our own church family, or for those that don't yet know Jesus, or the incredible privilege, like we've just seen in that video, to pray and to raise and release sons and daughters across the world. Praying changes lives. And we have to trust God for those people's lives. As Steve said, and as we saw in the video, the Regions Beyond family of churches are currently doing this same preaching series, looking at the values of Regions Beyond as we gear up to our gift day. What an amazing opportunity to finance the raising up and releasing of sons and daughters around the world with those 4 priorities. Now, I sat there looking at those 4 priorities and I was like, it's all about raising and releasing sons and daughters. I want you to pray to God that he will tell you how much to give in a few weeks' time. And that might be a penny. It might be thousands of pounds. And God is going to use that to change lives in this world. And that as somebody that we don't know in a country where they are not allowed to talk about Jesus in the way that we are now, when they get raised up and released as a son and daughter and they know that they belong in a family, they get to do that again like we do here. It's that ripple effect. And guys, if you grasp anything, it's that. We might never see the person who your penny or your thousands of pounds has changed, but we will know that the kingdom of God is changed forever and the enemy has to go. We have to trust God. Over the last 2 days, I've been away with work, and you might have seen on Instagram, like there was some moments of enjoyment in that time, but it was hard. I was at a board meeting with my bosses, and I believe that there was so much opposition from the enemy in the leading up to that meeting. For my job, I work for survivors of modern slavery. I have the incredible opportunity to raise up and release people into loving homes. As a team, we felt really stressed and anxious in the leading up to that meeting because we were asking for a lot. We wanted the trustees to say yes. And historically, they're really good at being that critical friend and sometimes saying no. But we knew that we were going to raise up and release people into what God is calling them to. That morning, so Friday morning, I'm in a different city having some work done on my car, which should be routine. Of course it wasn't, was it? It needs some work and a lot of money, and I was stranded. I was 50 miles away from where I needed to be for this meeting. I had to pray. I had to trust God that he was going to raise me up and release me to go to that meeting. He was so good. He did. It was amazing. The garage had just received a new car that wasn't allocated to anybody. And they said, do you know what, Sarah, you have that. And I tell you what, it's flash. It's too flash for me. I'm scared about it. It's too many buttons. I pressed a button, anxiously driving to the meeting, and I started getting prodded in my back. It's got heated massage seats. Like, this is just, it's too much. But I love that. I love that in my struggle, in my anxiety, God provided more. That Philippians 4, verse 6-7, I might have already read it, but I'll read it again. It says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So I had all of my stuff going on, and my bosses that morning also had their stuff going on. The work that they had predominantly done, but I was helping with, vanished. It just got deleted from all of our systems. And they got it back eventually. But again, it was so stressful. There was so much effort that we were putting in. And we arrived at the meeting together, and I felt that we needed to pray and trust God for the lives that we wanted to see changed. We needed to invite God into that because the decisions were going to affect the survivors that we work with. So we prayed, and I chose to trust God that he would be the one that would be changing, raising up and releasing sons and daughters through the work that we do. And in the meeting over those 2 days, God surpassed all our expectations. The trustees said to Helen and Jared, you're not asking enough of us. What do you actually want? What do you actually want to do? And Helen and Jared said it. And after some discussion, the trustees went, yeah, do it. And they never say have more money. You know, it was amazing. So good. But in that moment, you know, the enemy really tried to distract us. And so that's why this point of praying and trusting God is key. We need to trust God in his plan for those that we are wanting to raise up and release. Everybody has their own unique journey of faith. God's peace will guard our hearts and minds as we partner with him to raise and release sons and daughters. So as we contemplate these 4 points, let's remember that raising and releasing sons and daughters in the church as disciples is our mission. And we are not alone in this. God is with us every step of the way. By teaching God's word, imitating Jesus, discipling one another, and relying on prayer and trust, we create a family where his children can grow in faith and love and go on to serve God and to raise up and release others. I'd like us to respond. We're going to just have some music playing, as I would love the band to join in with our response. I'm going to do things a bit differently. We're going to get into groups of 3 or 4, and I'd love you to just spend a few moments chatting and then praying together. Perhaps this is your first time hearing this morning that you can belong to a family that wants to raise you up and release you. Can you just take those questions off, because everyone's reading them and not listening? Thank you. Okay. So if this is the first time that you are hearing about Jesus, tell that person in your group that you want to know more about him. Perhaps you are already a son and daughter and you want to raise and release yourself in situations, but you also feel stirred to raise and release other sons and daughters. So in a moment, those questions are going to come back on the screen. You can do it now. So who can you seek out for discipleship? How can you pray for sons and daughters and for others to be raised up and released in Birmingham and beyond, this country and the nations? Which areas of your life do you need to grow in to imitate Jesus, to raise sons and daughters? And who are you going to invite to Alpha this week? It is not too late to invite them. So